In the vast expanse of the galaxy where countless species have mastered the art of giving up on the broken, the damaged, and the seemingly hopeless, there exists one peculiar trait that sets humanity apart from every other civilization. It's not their technology, their weapons, or their cunning that makes aliens whisper about humans in hushed, fearful tones across star systems. It's their stubborn, illogical, utterly baffling refusal to abandon anything or anyone they've decided is worth saving. When the rest of the galaxy sees a lost cause, humans see a challenge. When others see impossibility, humans see Tuesday. And when a gruff human mechanic found a dying alien that every medical expert in 3 sectors had written off as beyond help, he didn't see a creature destined for euthanasia. He saw someone who just needed the right wrench applied in the right place. This is the story of what happens when human determination meets alien despair, when mechanical genius collides with biological impossibility, and when one man's workshop becomes the birthplace of a miracle that would shake the foundations of galactic medicine forever. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest words, "Not on my watch." Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting at the alien transport ship that limped into his orbital repair station like a wounded animal seeking shelter. The vessel's hull bore the telltale scorch marks of plasma fire, and its starboard engine was barely holding together with what appeared to be emergency patches and prayer. "Another day, another disaster," he muttered to himself, watching through the reinforced viewport of Bay 7 as the ship settled onto the docking platform with a groan of stressed metal. His station, affectionately nicknamed Chen's Last Resort by the locals, had earned its reputation as the place desperate travelers came when every other repair facility in the sector had turned them away. The airlock hissed open, and Marcus was surprised to see only 2 figures emerge. Most alien crews ran toward the dozen mark, but these appeared to be just a pair of Zilithians, tall, graceful beings with iridescent blue skin and elongated limbs that moved with an almost liquid fluidity. What caught his attention immediately was their body language. Even across species barriers, despair was a universal constant, and these 2 radiated it like heat from a fusion reactor. The taller of the 2 approached him with quick, urgent steps. "You are the human mechanic, yes? Chen Marcus?" Marcus Chen, actually, but close enough. "What's the problem?" He gestured toward their ship. "Looks like you tangled with something with bigger teeth than yours." "The ship? She is not the problem now," the Zilithian replied, his translator rendering his voice with a slight mechanical undertone. "We are Healer Calthis, and this is my aide, Fendar. We carry passenger who is dying." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm a mechanic, not a doctor. If you need medical help, the nearest hospital station is... no." The word came out sharp, desperate. "You do not understand. We have tried 17 medical facilities. 17. All say the same thing. Nothing can be done. But we hear stories about humans, stories that say you do not accept, nothing can be done." The mechanic studied the alien's face, noting the exhaustion etched in the fine lines around his large, dark eyes. What kind of stories? Stories of humans who rebuild what others call irreparable, who heal what others call unhealable, who never stop trying when logic says to stop. Calthis' voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Our passenger is Kyrathis of the Lyrian people. 3 solar cycles ago, her spine was severed in mining accident. The damage is complete. Every medical expert in 3 sectors agrees she will never walk again, never move below the neck again." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He'd heard of Lyrians, a feline-like species known for their incredible grace and agility. To lose mobility would be like clipping the wings of a bird of paradise. "And what makes you think I can do anything about that? I work on engines and hulls, not nervous systems." "Because," Fendar spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible, 3 days ago Kyrath asked us to find a place where she could die with dignity. She has given up hope entirely. But we heard about human who once repaired a crystalline navigator's shattered song matrix using spare parts from food processor. Another who restored mobility to gravitic dancer whose anti-gravity organs were destroyed by disease. Those were machines and biological systems with mechanical components, Marcus protested, but even as he said it, he knew he was going to look. It was the curse of his species. They couldn't leave a puzzle unsolved, a problem unfixed, especially when someone was suffering. The Zilithians exchanged glances. "Will you at least see her?" "Please?" Marcus sighed, tossing his rag onto the workbench. "Fine. But I'm not promising anything, and I mean anything. I'm not a miracle worker. In 3 sectors of space, the humans have reputation that says otherwise. The interior of the Zilithian ship was designed for their tall, slender frames, forcing Marcus to duck slightly as they led him through corridors that curved and flowed like the inside of a seashell. The air carried a faint scent of ozone and something floral that he couldn't identify. They stopped at a door marked with symbols that his translator identified as medical warnings. "She sleeps most of the time now," Caltis explained softly. "The pain medications are very strong, and she has little reason to remain conscious." The door slid open silently, revealing a medical bay that would have impressed doctors at any major hospital station. The room was filled with equipment Marcus didn't recognize, all of it humming quietly and displaying readouts in the flowing script of the Zilithian language. In the center of it all, suspended in a specialized medical bed that seemed to cradle her form like gentle hands, lay the most beautiful and heartbreaking sight Marcus had ever seen. Kairothis was unlike any alien he'd encountered. Whereas Zilithians were tall and blue, she was compact and ivory pale, her skin bearing a subtle pattern of markings that seemed to shift and flow in the medical bay's soft lighting. Her features were delicately feline, not the crude anthropomorphic cat people that appeared in human entertainment, but something far more elegant and alien. Her face was heart-shaped with large expressive eyes currently closed in medicated sleep, and her white hair fell in soft waves around pointed ears that twitched occasionally as if responding to sounds in dreams. But it was her stillness that struck him most profoundly. She lay perfectly motionless from the neck down, her breathing the only movement visible beneath the thin medical sheet that covered her small form. Various tubes and monitoring leads connected her to the surrounding equipment, painting a picture of a life sustained but not lived. "How old is she?" Marcus asked quietly. "By human standards?" "Perhaps 25 of your years." She was considered one of the most promising young engineers in Lyrian space before the accident. Calthis moved to check one of the displays. "Her people are naturally agile and graceful. Their entire culture revolves around movement, dance, physical expression. For a Lyrian to lose mobility is..." He trailed off. "It's like taking away what makes them who they are," Marcus finished. "Yes, exactly." Marcus moved closer to the bed, studying not just the patient, but the medical equipment surrounding her. His mind automatically began cataloging components, power sources, data flows. It was a habit that had served him well over the years, understanding how systems work together, where the connections work, what could be modified or improved. What exactly happened to her spine? Fendar pulled up a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional model of Lyrian anatomy. Here, at the 3rd vertebra down from the neck, complete severance. The bone, the nerve tissue, everything. It was instantaneous. Marcus studied the display, rotating it to view from different angles. "And the medical consensus is that it can't be repaired because Lyrian neural tissue does not regenerate like some species," Caltis explained. "Once severed, the connections are lost forever. We can keep the body alive, but the brain can no longer communicate with anything below the injury. It is why euthanasia is considered the merciful option." "But she hasn't chosen that?" "She has asked for it repeatedly, but her family, they could not bring themselves to authorize it. They asked us to seek any alternative, no matter how remote." Marcus continued studying the hologram, his mind working through possibilities and obstacles. What about prosthetics, cybernetic replacements? Lyrian physiology rejects most foreign materials. Their immune systems are extremely aggressive against anything they perceive as non-organic. Several attempts were made, all failed within days. Organic transplants? Lyrian's spinal tissue is too complex, too individualized. Even cloned replacements from her own cells could not properly integrate with the existing neural pathways. Marcus walked around the display examining it from every angle. Something about this situation reminded him of a problem he'd solved years ago. A freight hauler whose navigation computer had been fried by an ion storm. Every tech had said the ship was junk, but Marcus had managed to reroute the navigation functions through the environmental control system using improvised connections. Has anyone tried building a bridge instead of a replacement? The two Zalithians looked confused. A bridge? When you have two systems that need to communicate but the normal pathway is destroyed, sometimes you can create an alternate route. He pointed at the hologram. Instead of trying to repair the original connection or replace the damaged section, what if we built a workaround? I do not understand how this would be possible with living tissue. Maybe not with traditional medical approaches, Marcus said, his mind racing. But what if we combined biological and mechanical systems? Use technology to carry signals around the damage instead of through it? Kaltis and Fendar exchanged glances. This has been attempted. Cybernetic interfaces have been tried. They all fail because you're trying to integrate technology with biology directly, Marcus interrupted. What if we didn't? What if we created a completely separate communication network that could translate between the biological signals? At that moment, Kyra Thess stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. They were the most remarkable eyes Marcus had ever seen. Large, luminous, and colored a deep violet that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and pain in equal measure. She looked at him for a moment with confusion, then spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper. The translator rendered her words as, "Who is the new doctor who gives false hope?" "I'm not a doctor," Marcus replied honestly. "I'm a mechanic, and I don't know if there's any hope at all. But I'd like to understand your situation better before I give up on it." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. A mechanic? I fix things that other people say can't be fixed. It's kind of what I do. For the first time since Marcus had entered the room, Kyrothis showed something other than resignation. "And what is your preliminary diagnosis of me, mechanic?" Marcus considered his words carefully. "You're not broken. Your biological systems are intact and functional. You have a communication problem. Your brain can send signals, but they're not reaching their destination. That's an engineering problem, not a medical one." "And engineering problems have solutions?" "Usually. They might not be the solutions anyone expects, and they might not work the way the original system did, but yes. Most engineering problems have solutions if you're willing to think creatively enough." Kyra Thess was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Finally she asked, "Would you be willing to examine my medical records in detail to understand exactly what was damaged and how? If you want me to, I want you to try something that 17 medical experts said was impossible," she said softly. "Because if there is even the smallest chance that I could move again, that I could feel the ground beneath my feet or the wind in my hair," she closed her eyes briefly. "If there is any chance at all, then I want to take it." Marcus looked around the room at the sophisticated medical equipment, then back at Kyrothis. "I'll need to examine you more thoroughly. I'll need detailed scans, complete medical histories, and probably access to some equipment that isn't exactly standard medical issue." "Whatever you need," Kalthis said immediately, "and I'll need you to understand that this might not work. I might spend weeks studying your case, only to conclude that those 17 experts were right." "I understand," Kyrethus replied. "But will you try?" Marcus felt that familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling that had driven him to repair impossible machines, to solve problems that had stumped specialists across the galaxy. It was the part of him that had made him human in the eyes of dozens of alien species who couldn't understand why his people never learned to accept defeat gracefully. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'll try." As he spoke those words, he noticed something change in Kyrethus's expression. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it wasn't the complete despair he'd seen when he first entered the room. It was the look of someone who had just discovered that the universe might still hold surprises. What Marcus didn't realize was that he had just committed himself to attempting something that would challenge everything the galactic medical community thought they knew about the boundaries between life and machinery, between healing and engineering. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he was already beginning to formulate a plan that would either be remembered as the greatest breakthrough in medical history or the most spectacular failure of his career. Either way, he thought as he looked at Kyra Tess, it was going to be interesting. 3 days into his examination of Kyra Tess's case, Marcus found himself surrounded by holographic displays, medical charts, and technical specifications scattered across every available surface of his workshop. He converted an entire section of the repair bay into an impromptu medical research facility, much to the bemusement of his automated systems. Computer, display neural pathway mapping for Lyrian spinal column sections C7 through L5, he commanded, watching as the air filled with a three-dimensional representation of incredible complexity. The Lyrian nervous system was unlike anything he'd encountered. Where human spinal cords were relatively straightforward bundles of neural tissue, Lyrians had evolved something far more sophisticated. Their spinal columns contained multiple layers of neural networks that operated almost like computer buses, carrying different types of information along parallel pathways. Fascinating, he murmured, manipulating the display to highlight the motor control networks. It's like they evolved with built-in redundancy, but redundancy that was completely severed in the accident, Cultus said from behind him. The Zilithian healer had taken to spending his time in Marcus's workshop, partly to provide medical consultation and partly, Marcus suspected, because he was as curious about human problem-solving methods as Marcus was about alien physiology. "That's what I'm trying to understand," Marcus replied, zooming in on the injury site. "Look at this damage pattern. It's not just a clean cut. The explosion actually crushed about 2 centimeters of spinal tissue into basically neural paste, which is why conventional repair techniques cannot work. There is nothing left to reconnect." Marcus rotated the hologram, studying the damage from different angles. But what if we didn't try to reconnect? What if we bypassed the damage entirely? He called up another display showing the schematic of a device he'd been working on for the past day and night. It looked like a cross between a medical implant and the kind of signal processor used in Starship communication arrays. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," Marcus continued, his excitement growing as the pieces of the puzzle began clicking together in his mind. "Everyone's been approaching this like it's a medical problem, trying to heal tissue, regrow connections. But what if it's actually a communication problem?" Calthus leaned forward, studying the schematic. "I do not understand. Look at how Lyrian neural networks function. They're essentially biological computers, right? The brain sends commands down the spinal column like data packets through a network cable. The injury has severed that cable, but both ends are still functional." Marcus highlighted different sections of his design as he spoke. "What if, instead of trying to repair the cable, we installed a wireless relay system? Something that could pick up the neural signals above the injury, translate them into a format that could be transmitted wirelessly, then retranslate them back into biological signals below the injury site?" The Zilithian's large eyes widened as he grasped the concept. "You are suggesting creating an artificial neural bridge using technology instead of biology." "Exactly, but not just any technology. We'd need something that could interface with Lyrian neural tissue without triggering rejection responses, something that could process and retransmit the incredibly complex signals involved in motor control, and something that could do it all in real time, with zero latency. Such a device would be." Calthus paused, considering. "It would require processing power comparable to a ship's navigation computer, miniaturized to the size of a medical implant, and somehow made biocompatible with one of the most rejection-prone physiologies in known space." "I know," Marcus grinned. "Impossible, right?" Before Calthus could respond, an alert chimed from the medical bay where Kyrathis was resting. They both hurried to check on her, finding her awake and studying a small holographic display that showed technical specifications for various electronic components. "I hope you do not mind," she said as they entered. "I accessed your workshop's database to better understand what you are attempting." "And what do you think?" Marcus asked, settling into a chair beside her bed. "I think you are either completely insane or the first person to look at my condition as an engineering challenge rather than a medical impossibility." Her violet eyes met his. "I also think that if anyone in the galaxy could design such a device, it would be a human." "Why humans specifically?" "Because your species has a reputation for creating impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. Other races innovate by improving existing technology. Humans innovate by completely reimagining what technology should be." Marcus felt a flush of pride, but forced himself to focus on the technical challenges. Even if the concept is sound, the practical difficulties are enormous. The processing requirements alone. "What if you did not have to build everything from scratch?" Kyrithus interrupted. "What if some of the components already existed, just not in the configuration you need?" She manipulated her display, calling up specifications for something Marcus didn't immediately recognize. "This is a Lyrian bioresonance processor. We use them in our medical monitoring equipment to interface with our neural tissue without triggering rejection responses." Marcus studied the specs, his mind racing. "The biocompatibility problem, you're saying this technology already exists?" "For simple monitoring and basic stimulus response, yes. The challenge would be adapting it for the complex signal processing you propose." "And the processing power requirements," Kalthus added. "Even if we could interface properly, the computational demands." Marcus was already pulling up new displays, his fingers flying over the control interface. "What about quantum processors, specifically the kind used in gravitic dancer navigation systems?" Both aliens looked at him with confusion. "Gravitic dancers are a machine race," Kalthus said. "Their quantum processing technology is completely incompatible with biological systems." "Not directly, no. But what if we used it as the core processor and built translation layers around it?" Marcus's excitement was growing as the solution began to take shape in his mind. Lyrian bioresonance technology for neural interface, quantum processing for the heavy computational work, and some kind of middleware to translate between the two. "The power requirements would be substantial," Kyrithus pointed out. "Actually, they wouldn't," Marcus said, calling up energy consumption specifications. "Quantum processors are incredibly energy efficient once they're running. The bioresonance systems use almost no power. The biggest drain would be the translation software, and I think I can optimize that." He paused, looking at both of his new colleagues. "There's just one problem. To build this thing, I'm going to need components from about 6 different alien technologies, including some that are extremely rare and expensive." "What would you need?" Kalthus asked. Marcus began listing items, watching as the Zilithian's expression grew more and more concerned. "A gravitic dancer quantum processing core, Lyrian bioresonance interface components, crystalline memory storage matrices for the translation algorithms, Valderan power cells for backup systems, and probably a dozen other specialized components." "Astronomical," Marcus finished. "We're talking about technology that's worth more than most starships." Silence fell over the room as the reality of the situation settled in. Even if the concept was sound, even if Marcus could design and build such a device, the components needed were beyond the resources of anyone present. "There is a possibility," Kyrithus said slowly, "but you would not like it." "I'm listening." "My family owns mining operations throughout Lyrian space. The accident that injured me happened in one of our quantum crystal mines. Our insurance settlements from the accident," she paused, clearly struggling with the words. "The payout was calculated based on my expected lifetime earnings as an engineer, plus compensation for my suffering." Marcus began to understand what she was suggesting. "You're talking about using your disability insurance payout to fund an experimental procedure that might not work. I am talking about using money that exists only because I am paralyzed to fund the only chance I have of not being paralyzed anymore." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the emotion in her eyes. "If this fails, I lose the money, but I am no worse off than I am now. If it succeeds, you get your life back." Marcus finished. "More than that?" she said quietly. If it succeeds, we prove that the impossible is just another engineering problem waiting for the right solution." Marcus looked at the holographic displays surrounding them, at the technical specifications and design concepts that represented months of work condensed into 3 days of intense focus. He thought about the 17 medical experts who had declared Kyrethes's case hopeless, about the established medical wisdom that said some things simply couldn't be fixed. Then he thought about his reputation as someone who specialized in the allegedly impossible. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this right. Full testing, multiple backup systems, and we don't attempt implantation until we're absolutely certain the device will work." "How long will that take?" Kalthis asked. "To design, build, and test a completely revolutionary piece of biotechnology that combines 6 different alien technologies into something that's never been attempted before." Marcus considered. "At least 2 months, probably 3. And you believe you can succeed?" Marcus looked at Kyrethis, seeing hope beginning to kindle in her violet eyes for the first time since he'd met her. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It could sustain someone through impossible odds, but it could also make failure infinitely more devastating. "I believe it's worth trying," he said carefully, "and I believe that if anyone can make this work, it's us. But Kyra, you need to understand, this is experimental technology. Even if everything goes perfectly, even if the device works exactly as designed, there could be complications we haven't anticipated." "I understand the risks. Do you? Because we're talking about experimental surgery to implant alien technology into your spinal column. If something goes wrong, it could kill you. And if I do nothing, I die slowly of despair instead of quickly of hope," she replied. "I have spent 3 months unable to feel anything below my neck, unable to move, unable to live any kind of life worth living. If you can give me even a chance of changing that, then whatever the risks are, I will take them." Marcus nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. Someone's life was about to depend on his ability to solve a problem that had defeated the best medical minds in 3 sectors of space. It was exactly the kind of challenge that made him proud to be human. "All right then," he said, bringing up a new set of displays. "Let's start by figuring out exactly what we need to build, where we can get the components, and how we're going to put together the most sophisticated piece of bioengineering technology the galaxy has ever seen." As he spoke, Marcus was already lost in the problem, his mind racing through design possibilities and technical challenges. Somewhere in the back of his consciousness, he was aware that he was about to attempt something that would either establish humans as the galaxy's most innovative medical engineers or confirm their reputation as reckless beings who didn't know when to quit. Either way, he thought with a grin, it was going to be the most interesting project of his career. 6 weeks after Marcus had committed to the impossible, his workshop had transformed into something that would have impressed engineers from a dozen different species. Components from across the galaxy lay precisely organized on specialized workbenches, while holographic displays showed real-time simulations of neural activity, quantum processing algorithms, and biocompatibility tests. The centerpiece of it all was a device no larger than Marcus's thumb, suspended in a containment field that kept it sterile and stable while he made final adjustments to its quantum core. It looked deceptively simple. A smooth, pearl-colored cylinder with hairline traces of crystalline material running along its surface, but contained within that small package was processing power that rivaled some starship computers, biointerface technology that had taken Lyrian scientists centuries to perfect, and software that Marcus had written to translate between biological and quantum systems. "Neural Simulation Test 47 completed," his workshop AI announced. "All responses within acceptable parameters. Biocompatibility index remains at 98.7%. Marcus leaned back from his workbench, rubbing eyes that felt gritty from weeks of intense focus. "What about response time?" "Signal processing delay averages 2.3 milliseconds, well within the threshold for natural motor control responses." "Power consumption?" "Stable at 3.1 watts during active processing, dropping to 0.8 watts during standby mode." Marcus nodded, checking items off his mental list. Every test they'd run over the past month had exceeded expectations. The device worked flawlessly in simulations, responded perfectly to every scenario they'd programmed, and showed no signs of the compatibility issues that had plagued previous attempts to integrate technology with Lyrian biology. Which was exactly what worried him. "Cultists," he called to the Zalithian, who was monitoring biocompatibility tests at another workstation. "Have you ever seen an experimental medical device perform this well in testing?" The healer looked up from his displays, his expression troubled. "Never. In my experience, new medical technology always has unexpected complications during initial trials." "That's what I thought." Marcus walked over to where Kyrithis was reviewing the latest test results on her personal display. Over the weeks, she had become an integral part of the design process, her engineering background proving invaluable in solving the countless technical challenges they'd encountered. "You're worried that it's working too well," she said without looking up from her screen. "Aren't you?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But not for the reasons you might think." Marcus settled into his usual chair beside her medical bed. Their relationship had evolved from patient-doctor to something more like colleagues working on a shared project. He found her intelligence challenging and her perspective unique. She understood both the technical complexities of what they were building and the personal stakes involved in a way that nobody else could. "What reasons, then?" "I'm terrified that it will work perfectly, that I'll be able to move again, and that I won't remember how." She gestured weakly at her immobile body. "It's been almost 4 months now, Marcus. 4 months without feeling anything below my neck, without any motor control, without even the sensation of breathing because the respirator does it for me." Marcus hadn't considered this particular complication. "You're worried about relearning how to use your body?" "I'm worried that I won't be able to. That even if the device provides perfect neural communication, my brain will have forgotten how to process the responses. That I'll be technically mobile but functionally still paralyzed." "Physical therapy can help with that," Kalthis interjected from across the room. "Muscle memory can be retrained." "Can it?" Kirithis asked. "How do you retrain someone to walk when they've forgotten what walking feels like? How do you teach someone to balance when they can't remember the sensation of having legs?" Marcus considered this problem, his engineering mind automatically beginning to search for solutions. What if we approached it gradually? Instead of activating the full device at once, what if we brought different systems online slowly? "Explain." "The device is designed to handle all motor control and sensory feedback, right? But there's no reason we couldn't activate just partial functions initially. Start with basic sensation, just feeling that you have legs again. Then simple motor responses like flexing muscles. Work up to complex movements over time." Kyrithis' eyes brightened with interest. "A graduated activation protocol." "Exactly. Give your brain time to remember how to process the signals before we ask it to handle everything at once." "That could work," Kalthis agreed. "It would also let us monitor for complications gradually instead of risking everything on a single full activation." Marcus was already pulling up the device's control software, examining the code he'd written to manage communication between the quantum processor and the bioresonance interfaces. "I can modify the activation protocols, create a series of test programs that would bring different neural pathways online in sequence." "How long would the full process take?" Kyrithis asked. "Depends on how your brain adapts to each stage. Could be days, could be weeks. We'd have to monitor your responses and adjust the timeline accordingly." For the first time in weeks, Marcus saw something in Kyrithis' expression that went beyond hope. It was the kind of excitement that came from seeing a clear path forward instead of just a distant possibility. "When can we begin?" she asked. Marcus looked at the device suspended in its containment field, then at the displays showing weeks of successful test results. Every rational part of his mind said they needed more testing, more simulations, more safety protocols. But every instinct he'd developed as someone who specialized in solving impossible problems said they were as ready as they were ever going to be. "The implantation surgery itself will take about 4 hours, Kalthis said. "It's complex, but not beyond my capabilities. The question is whether we're ready to take that step." "What would you recommend?" Marcus asked. "1 more week of testing." Run every scenario we can think of, stress test the device beyond any reasonable operational parameters, and prepare for every complication we can imagine. And if everything checks out, then we attempt something that has never been done before." Marcus looked at Kyrithis, seeing determination in her violet eyes along with the excitement and hope. "Are you ready for this? I've been ready since the day you walked into my medical bay and told me I wasn't broken, just disconnected." She paused. "But I want you to know that whatever happens, this has already been worth it." "How so?" "For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. Not a patient, not a victim, not someone to be pitied. I feel like an engineer working on the most important project of her life." She smiled. "That alone is more healing than any of those 17 medical experts provided." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with professional pride and everything to do with seeing someone reclaim their sense of purpose. "Well then, let's make sure the project is a complete success." Over the next week, they pushed the device through tests that would have destroyed lesser technology. They simulated power failures, electromagnetic interference, component degradation, and signal corruption. They modeled scenarios where the quantum processor developed faults, where the bioresonance interfaces failed, where the translation software encountered inputs it couldn't process. The device passed every test. They ran compatibility simulations using detailed scans of Kyrithes's specific neural patterns, testing how the device would respond to her particular brain chemistry and signal characteristics. They modeled the surgical implantation process dozens of times, identifying potential complications and developing contingency protocols for each one. Everything indicated that the procedure had an excellent chance of success. On the final day before the planned surgery, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. He was running one last test of the quantum processing core when he noticed an anomaly in the power consumption readings. It was tiny, just a few milliwatts of variation that appeared for microseconds during complex calculations. Any other time, he would have dismissed it as normal fluctuation. But Marcus had spent his career learning that tiny anomalies in complex systems often indicated much larger problems. Computer analyzed power consumption anomaly in quantum core during test sequence 47 alpha. Analysis indicates microfluctuations consistent with quantum coherent instability during high-load processing operations. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Probability of coherence cascade failure under sustained load. Estimated range from 12% to 68% within first year of operation. Computer, what would happen if the quantum core experienced coherence cascade failure while implanted in a living patient? Patient would lose all motor control and sensation within nanoseconds. Marcus stared at the readings, his mind racing through implications. The device worked perfectly under normal conditions, but under sustained heavy load, exactly the kind of processing requirements involved in complex motor control, there was a significant chance of catastrophic failure. Failure that would leave Kyrithis not just paralyzed, but potentially trapped in a body that had become dependent on the device for basic neural communication. "Marcus?" Kyrithis called from across the room. "Is something wrong?" He looked at her, seeing trust and anticipation in her expression, knowing that in just a few hours she was scheduled to undergo surgery that might kill her. "We might have a problem," he said quietly. "What kind of problem?" Marcus walked over to her bed, bringing up the anomalous readings on her display. As he explained what he'd found, he watched hope fade from her eyes and be replaced by a familiar resignation. "So the device could fail," she said when he'd finished. "Not immediately, and maybe not at all. But there's a significant risk of failure under heavy load, and we can't predict when or how that might happen." "And if it fails while implanted?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "You'd be worse off than you are now. Right now, your body has adapted to paralysis. If the device fails after you've become dependent on it for neural communication, I understand." Her voice was quiet but steady. "So what do you recommend?" Marcus looked at the device that represented weeks of work and revolutionary engineering, then back at Kairothis. Every instinct he had as an engineer said to solve the problem, find a way to eliminate the risk, but every instinct he had as someone who cared about her well-being said the risk was too great. I recommend we don't proceed until I can solve the coherent stability issue. And how long will that take? I don't know. Weeks, months. Kairothis was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on something beyond the confines of the medical bay. When she finally spoke, her voice held a quality Marcus had never heard before. Or we could proceed anyway. Kyra, listen to me, she interrupted. For 4 months I have been trapped in a body that feels nothing and responds to nothing. Every day is exactly the same, lying here, thinking, remembering what it was like to move. Do you know what that's like? Marcus shook his head. It's not living. It's existing, but it's not living. And every day it gets a little harder to remember why existence is better than nothing. She turned her violet eyes to meet his. You're offering me a chance to live again, even if that chance comes with risks. Even if the device fails in a year, or 6 months, or 6 weeks, that would still be more real life than I've had since the accident. But if it fails, I'll deal with that when it happens. But if we don't try because we're afraid it might fail, then I never get the chance to find out if it would have worked. Marcus looked at her, seeing courage that humbled him. She was asking him to help her gamble everything on a device that might work perfectly or might catastrophically fail, and she was doing it with full knowledge of the risks. It was exactly the kind of impossible decision that made humans both admired and feared throughout the galaxy. The question was he brave enough to let her take that gamble? The surgical bay of Marcus's repair station had been transformed into something that would rival the operating theaters of major medical facilities. Kalthis had spent 2 days setting up monitoring equipment, sterilization fields, and backup systems, while Marcus made final modifications to the device that might change Kairothis' life forever. Now, as she lay on the surgical table with neural monitoring leads attached to her temples, Marcus found himself questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Quantum core stability at optimal parameters, his workshop AI reported. Bioresonance interfaces calibrated to patients' specific neural patterns, all systems ready for implantation. Patient vital signs stable, Kalthis added, his hands moving with practiced precision as he prepared the surgical site. Neural activity within normal ranges for preoperative conditions. Marcus looked at the device one final time before handing it to Kalthis. Weeks of work, revolutionary technology, and Kairothis' future all contained within that small, pearl-colored cylinder. Are you ready for this? He asked her. I've been ready for months, she replied, though he could hear the tension beneath her calm words. The real question is whether you're ready. Honestly, no. Every instinct I have says we need more testing, more safety protocols, more everything. And yet every instinct I have also says that sometimes you have to trust your work and take the leap. Kairothis smiled. Very human. Yeah, well, it's gotten us this far. The surgery itself was a masterpiece of precision engineering. Kalthis worked with the kind of focused intensity that came from years of medical training, while Marcus monitored the device's systems and provided technical guidance when needed. The implantation required creating precisely positioned interfaces above and below the injury site, then calibrating the quantum processing core to match Kairothis' specific neural patterns. 4 hours after they'd begun, the device was in place and sealed within biocompatible housing that would protect it from Kairothis' immune system. Days, surgical phase complete, Kalthis announced, his voice slightly hoarse from concentration. Device placement optimal. No complications detected. Device status? Marcus asked. All systems online and functioning within normal parameters. Ready for initial activation sequence. Marcus looked at Kairothis, who had remained conscious throughout the procedure at her own insistence. How do you feel? Exactly the same as before, which I suppose means the surgery went well. The real test comes now. We're going to start with the most basic activation protocol, just sensation feedback from your legs. You shouldn't feel any motor control yet, just the awareness that you have legs again. I understand. Marcus's fingers hovered over the activation controls. Once he initiated the sequence, there would be no going back. Kyrithes's life would either improve dramatically or become infinitely more complicated. Initiating Phase 1 activation, he announced. The device came online with no fanfare, just a soft hum that was barely audible and a series of green indicators on Marcus's control panel. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Kyrithess gasped. "What?" Marcus asked, immediately concerned. "What are you feeling?" "My legs," she whispered, and there were tears in her violet eyes. "I can feel my legs." "Describe the sensation." They're there for the first time in 4 months. I can feel that I have legs." She was crying now, overwhelmed by the return of sensation she had thought lost forever. They feel heavy, and there's a tingling like when circulation returns to a limb that's fallen asleep. But, Marcus, I can feel them. Marcus checked his readings, confirming that the device was processing and transmitting sensory information from her lower body to her brain. Everything looks good from a technical standpoint. Any discomfort or unusual sensations? No, it's like waking up after a very long sleep. They spent the next hour testing the sensory feedback, confirming that Kyrithess could feel touch, pressure, and temperature throughout her lower body. The device translated biological signals flawlessly, providing her brain with the sensory information it had been denied since the accident. Phase 1 complete, Marcus announced. Ready for Phase 2? What does Phase 2 involve? Basic motor control. We'll start with simple muscle flexion, just enough to confirm that the device can carry motor commands from your brain to your muscles. Kyrithess took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Marcus initiated the second activation sequence, bringing the device's motor control functions online. Again, there was no indication of change except for new indicators on his control panel. "Try to flex your toes," he instructed. Kyrithess concentrated, her face showing the intense focus of someone attempting something she hadn't done in months. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then her toes moved. It was barely perceptible, just a slight twitch of her left big toe, but it was voluntary movement controlled by her own brain for the first time since the accident. "Oh," she breathed, staring down at her feet with wonder. "Oh, I did that. I made that happen." "Try again," Marcus encouraged. This time, all the toes on her left foot flexed visibly, followed by movement in her right foot. Kyrithess was crying again, but these were tears of joy rather than overwhelming sensation. "It works," she said, her voice filled with amazement. "It actually works. So far," Marcus cautioned, though he couldn't suppress his own excitement. "We still need to test larger muscle groups, complex movements, and sustained activity." They progressed through the activation protocol methodically, bringing different muscle groups online and testing increasingly complex movements. Within 6 hours, Kyrithess had regained motor control of her entire lower body. She could flex her ankles, bend her knees, and even attempt to sit up with assistance. "The integration is remarkable," Kyrithess observed, monitoring her neural activity. "Her brain is adapting to the device's signal processing faster than I would have thought possible. Lyrian neural plasticity," Kyrithess explained, working to maintain a sitting position with support from the medical bed's adjustable frame. "It's why we're naturally graceful. We can learn new physical skills very rapidly." Marcus was reviewing the device's performance logs when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The quantum core was showing the same microfluctuations he detected during testing, but they were more frequent now and slightly larger in magnitude. "Kyrithess, what's Kyra's neural activity level compared to baseline?" The Zalithian checked his readings. "Elevated. She's using significantly more neural processing power than normal as her brain adapts to the device interface." "Which means the device is working harder than during our simulations," Marcus realized. The increased load was exactly the condition that had triggered the quantum coherence instabilities during testing. "Is there a problem?" Kyrithess asked, noticing his concerned expression. Marcus was faced with a horrible choice. The device was working perfectly. She was regaining sensation and motor control beyond their most optimistic projections, but the increased neural load was pushing the quantum core closer to the failure threshold with every passing hour. He could deactivate the device now while it was still functioning normally and work on solving the stability issue, but that would mean taking away the mobility she had just regained, essentially paralyzing her again after showing her what she had lost. Or he could continue the activation protocol and hope that the quantum core would stabilize once her brain finished adapting to the interface. "Marcus," she pressed, "what's wrong?" He made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Nothing's wrong," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "I'm just seeing some elevated activity as your brain adapts to the interface. It's within expected parameters." It wasn't a complete lie. The elevated activity was expected, even if its implications for the quantum core stability weren't. But telling her the truth would mean admitting that he'd proceeded with the surgery knowing there were unresolved safety issues. "Should we continue to the next phase?" Cultus asked. Marcus looked at Kyrithus, seeing hope and determination in her expression. She was closer to being fully mobile than she'd been since the accident. Stopping now would be devastating for her psychologically, but continuing might be devastating in other ways. "What's the next phase?" she asked. "Full integration," Marcus explained. "We bring all motor control systems online simultaneously and begin testing complex movements like standing and walking."
"And after that? After that, assuming everything continues to work normally, the device should provide you with complete motor control and sensation."
"You'd be able to walk, run, dance, whatever your muscles are capable of after physical rehabilitation." Kyrithus looked down at her legs, flexing her feet experimentally. "And you believe the device can handle that level of activity?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "I believe it's designed to handle that level of activity." It was another technical truth that avoided the larger question of long-term stability. But seeing the joy in her eyes as she regained control of her body, Marcus couldn't bring himself to take that away from her based on theoretical risks. "Then let's complete the process," she said firmly. Marcus initiated the final activation sequence, bringing the device to full operational capacity. The quantum core's processing load increased dramatically as it began handling the complete range of neural communications between Kyrithus's brain and her lower body. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like myself again," she replied, slowly moving her legs under her own power for the first time in months. "Marcus, I know there are risks. I know this technology is experimental and that things could go wrong. But right now, in this moment, I feel alive in a way I haven't since the accident." She attempted to swing her legs over the side of the medical bed, and Marcus moved quickly to support her. "Easy. Your muscles haven't been used in months. Even with perfect neural control, they're going to be weak." "I know." "But Marcus, I'm sitting up on my own. I'm moving my legs. This morning I couldn't feel anything below my neck, and now I can wiggle my toes whenever I want to." Marcus helped her maintain her sitting position while monitoring the device's performance. The quantum core was operating at maximum capacity, but all systems remained stable. Maybe, he thought, the stability issues would resolve themselves as the system optimized. "I want to try standing," Kyrithus announced. "That might be premature. Please. I know I'll need support, and I know my legs won't be strong enough to hold my weight for long. But I want to try." Marcus looked at Kyrithus, who nodded slightly. Together they helped Kyrithus to her feet, supporting most of her weight while her atrophied muscles remembered how to function. For 30 seconds, she stood upright with assistance, tears streaming down her face as she experienced the sensation of bearing weight on her legs for the first time since the accident. "Thank you," she whispered. "Whatever happens from here, thank you for giving me this." Marcus felt a complex mix of pride, hope, and terror as he helped her sit back down. The device was performing flawlessly, giving her back capabilities she had thought lost forever. But deep in its quantum core, microscopic instabilities were growing with each passing hour, threatening to take it all away when she least expected it. He had successfully created a miracle of bioengineering that could revolutionize treatment for paralysis. Throughout the galaxy, he had also created a time bomb that might destroy the person he had been trying to save. The question now was whether he would have time to defuse it before it exploded. 2 weeks after the surgery, Marcus watched Kyrathis take her first unassisted steps across the workshop floor. Her movement was careful and deliberate, the result of muscles still rebuilding strength, but it was undeniably walking. She moved with increasing confidence each day, her natural Lyrian grace beginning to reassert itself as her body remembered skills it had thought lost forever. Range of motion tests completed, Kelthis announced, reviewing the data from her morning physical therapy session. Motor control at 93% of pre-injury baseline. Sensory response time averaging 4 milliseconds. By all medical standards, this is a complete recovery. Marcus should have felt triumphant. The device had exceeded every performance expectation, providing Kyrathis with mobility that surpassed what many natural healing processes could achieve. She could walk, run for short distances, and was already talking about returning to her engineering work. Instead, he felt sick with worry. "Computer, display quantum core stability analysis for the past 24 hours, he commanded quietly, hoping Kyrathis wouldn't notice his concern. Quantum coherence fluctuations have increased by 12% since yesterday. Current instability index at 47% of critical threshold. Marcus closed the display quickly, but not before confirming what he'd feared. The quantum core was degrading faster than his most pessimistic projections. At the current rate, they had perhaps 3 weeks before coherence cascade failure became inevitable, 3 weeks before Kyrathis lost everything she had regained. "Marcus, is something troubling you?" she asked, settling into a chair beside his workstation. The simple act of choosing to sit down, of having that choice, was something she still savored. "Just reviewing performance data," he replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. "And? The device is performing within acceptable parameters." Kyrathis studied his face with the analytical eye of an engineer who had learned to read both machines and people. "That's not what I asked. I asked if something was troubling you." Marcus met her gaze, seeing intelligence and growing suspicion in her violet eyes. Over the past weeks, as she had regained her mobility, she had also regained her confidence and her ability to see through his carefully worded technical reports. "There are some stability issues with the quantum core," he admitted. "Nothing immediate, but something I need to address." "Define nothing immediate." Marcus hesitated, weighing the value of hope against the danger of unpreparedness. "The quantum processing unit is showing signs of coherence degradation. If the trend continues, it could affect device performance." "When?" "Unknown. Could be months, could be years." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But it was a lie that preserved the possibility that he might find a solution before the truth became unavoidable. "Show me the data," she said simply. "Kyra, Marcus, I'm an engineer. I understand quantum systems, coherence theory, and failure analysis." "Show me the data." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then pulled up the stability analysis on his main display. He watched her expression change as she absorbed the information, seeing the exact moment when she grasped the implications. 3 weeks, she said quietly. "Maybe 4 if we reduce system load. Those are worst-case projections. Those are the most likely projections based on current degradation rates," she corrected. "You've been monitoring this since the surgery, haven't you?" Marcus nodded reluctantly. "And you didn't tell me because?" "Because I was hoping I could solve it before it became an issue. Because I didn't want to take away your hope when you were just getting your life back." Kyrathis was quiet for several minutes, studying the data and running her own calculations. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful rather than accusatory. "The degradation is accelerating because my brain is using the device more efficiently. As the interface optimizes, it's creating more complex processing demands that stress the quantum core beyond its design limits. That's my assessment as well, which means that the better I get at using my body again, the faster the device will fail." Marcus felt the weight of that irony like a physical blow. "I'm working on solutions. There might be ways to stabilize the quantum core, or alternative processing architectures that could handle the load more efficiently." "How long would developing those solutions take?" "Months, maybe longer." "Time we don't have." Time I'm going to find, Marcus said firmly. This isn't over, Kyra. I didn't come this far to give up because of an engineering challenge. She smiled sadly. Very human. But Marcus, what if you can't solve it in time? Then I'll find another way. Build a better device, develop new technology, something. And in the meantime, Marcus had been avoiding that question, but now he was forced to confront it directly. In the meantime, we could reduce system load, limit your physical activity to preserve quantum core stability. You mean become partially paralyzed again to prevent becoming completely paralyzed later? It would buy us time. Time spent as an invalid, watching my body slowly shut down again. Marcus wanted to argue, to present alternatives, but every solution he could think of involved trading mobility for longevity, or vice versa. There didn't seem to be a path that preserved both. There is another option, Kyrithus said quietly. What option? We could accept that this device has given me something unprecedented, 3 weeks, maybe a month of normal life after 4 months of paralysis. We could make sure those weeks count for something. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized what she was suggesting. You want to give up? I want to live. Really live for whatever time the device can give me, and I want to make sure that when it fails, the knowledge we've gained doesn't die with it. She stood up and walked to the workstation, displaying the device schematics, her movement still careful but increasingly natural. Marcus, what we've accomplished here is revolutionary. Even if the current device fails, the principles are sound. The integration of quantum processing with biological systems works. The bioresonance interfaces are stable. The translation algorithms are effective. But the quantum core is a single component that needs improvement, one piece of a larger puzzle that we've essentially solved. Marcus began to understand what she was driving toward. You want to document everything. Create a complete record of the technology so others can improve on it. I want to ensure that my situation becomes the foundation for helping others instead of being remembered as a tragic failure. If we can refine the quantum core stability issues, this technology could help thousands of paralyzed individuals across dozens of species. But that would mean accepting that your device is going to fail. It means accepting that my device is a prototype, and prototypes are supposed to fail so that production models can succeed. Marcus looked at her, seeing a kind of courage that humbled him. She was proposing to sacrifice her own chance at long-term mobility to ensure that the technology would eventually help others. What exactly are you suggesting? 3 things. First, we document everything. Complete schematics, surgical procedures, software algorithms, lessons learned. Create a knowledge base that other engineers can build upon. Second, we push the device to its limits, test complex movements, sustained activity, everything I couldn't do when I was paralyzed. Gather as much performance data as possible to help optimize future versions. That would accelerate the degradation.
Yes.
But it would also provide invaluable information about how the device performs under real-world conditions. Marcus was beginning to see the logic, even as he hated its implications. And third, we find someone to continue the work after the device fails. Someone who can take what we've learned and develop the next generation of technology. Kyra, Marcus, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that there has to be a way to save both me and the technology. And maybe there is, somewhere down the line. But right now, we have an opportunity to ensure that this breakthrough doesn't disappear when my device fails. Marcus looked around his workshop at the displays showing revolutionary technology that he'd created to help one person and might now use to help many. There might be another way. What way? What if we could extract the device before it fails catastrophically? If we time it right, we could remove it while the quantum core is still functional, analyze the degradation patterns, and use that information to design a better version. Kyrithus considered this, and then I would be paralyzed again while you develop the improved version. Temporarily, yes. For how long? I don't know. Months, probably. And what guarantee would I have that the next version would work? Marcus realized he couldn't give her that guarantee. None. But at least you'd be alive to find out. Marcus, look at me. He met her eyes, seeing determination mixed with something that might have been pity. 4 months ago, I was ready to die because I couldn't bear the thought of living without being able to move. You gave me the gift of walking again, of feeling alive again, even if it's temporary. Do you really think I would choose to give that up and return to paralysis based on the hope that you might be able to fix the problem eventually? Marcus wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that hope for the future was worth sacrificing the present. But looking at Caerithus, seeing her standing there under her own power, seeing the life that had returned to her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to ask her to trade that for an uncertain promise. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We have 3 weeks, maybe 4. We use them to push the boundaries of what this technology can do, document everything we learn, and create a legacy that will help others long after my device fails." "And after it fails?" "After it fails, you take everything we've learned and build something better for the next person who needs it." Marcus looked at this remarkable woman who was proposing to use her borrowed time to help others, who was facing the certain failure of her life-changing device with courage and purpose instead of despair. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this right. We document everything, test everything, and when your device fails, we make damn sure it's the last time anyone has to face this situation without better options." Agreed. "And Kyra, when we build the next version, it's going to be for you too. This isn't over." She smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it was a smile without any shadow of sadness. "Very human, Marcus. Thank you for that." As she walked away to begin her exercises, movements that would provide crucial data while hastening the device's failure, Marcus turned back to his workstations and began the process of documenting a revolution in biotechnology. He was determined that Caerithus' sacrifice would not be in vain, and that her courage would inspire solutions that would help countless others. But first, he was going to make absolutely certain that the next 3 weeks were the most alive she had ever felt. Because that, he thought, was what humans did when faced with the impossible. They turned tragedy into triumph, failure into foundation, and individual sacrifice into universal hope. It was exactly what made them the species that other races turned to when they needed the impossible made possible.